February 19th, Fred Rogers. Welcome to 365 Christian Men, where every day we aim to inspire and encourage with real-life stories about men. Rogers was a puppeteer, writer, producer, and ordained minister. At his ordination, the Presbyterian Church asked him to use television to minister to children and families. On this date, in 1968, the premiere episode of Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood aired, and it ran on PBS from 1968 to 2001. Rogers produced, wrote, and hosted the TV program Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood. He had a degree in music composition and wrote 200 songs for the show, including the theme song, Won't You Be My Neighbor? Among several Emmy Awards and other awards, in 2002, Rogers was awarded the nation's highest civilian award, the Presidential Medal of Freedom. Here's a story about Rogers being neighborly.
There is always time for encouragement. Fred Rogers was a busy man. As the host of Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood, he was constantly on the go, running an internationally acclaimed television show and raising a family of his own. Still, no matter how busy he was, Mr. Rogers always made time for others. He knew people always needed a word of encouragement. A young college student named Anthony was having a hard time, feeling hopeless, lonely, and angry. Discouragement overwhelmed him. In the middle of all that, he suffered a devastating loss. How could the future get better, he thought. Upon leaving his dorm room, he walked down the hallway, but heard a familiar song and stopped to listen. Won't You Be My Neighbor? He turned to find an empty room playing Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood, and the host was asking what you should do when you feel angry. Anthony watched the show without sitting down, and he suddenly started to feel a little bit better. It was the magic of Fred Rogers' kind voice. Several days passed, and Anthony got onto the elevator at the college to ride down to the lobby. When the doors opened, a familiar face appeared. It was Mr. Rogers himself, wearing a big coat and scarf and carrying a small case in front of him. Rogers smiled and greeted him, and they rode the elevator together in silence. When the doors opened, Rogers allowed Anthony to go first. But as they stepped into the lobby, Anthony had to say something. Mr. Rogers, I don't mean to bother you, but I just wanted to say thanks. Rogers smiled and asked, Did you grow up as one of my television neighbors? Anthony said that he had, and Rogers opened his arms for a hug. It's good to see you again, neighbor. They hugged and walked through the lobby together, engaging in small talk. As they made it to the door, Anthony mentioned that he had watched the show some days before and that it really helped him to get through a hard time, and he thanked Rogers again. But instead of leaving to go about his business, Rogers paused and then stepped back into the lobby. He unraveled his scarf, motioned toward the window, and sat on the ledge. He turned to Anthony in concern. Do you want to tell me what was upsetting you? He said. Anthony was shocked. Most people wouldn't take the time to hear about his life, but Mr. Rogers was different. Anthony sat at the window and told Rogers what was bothering him, but this time he went deeper. He shared that his grandfather had died and how losing one of the few good things in his life made him feel broken. Rogers listened intently and then shared how losing his own grandfather had hurt him too. You'll never stop missing the people you love, he said. He even shared how his grandfather got him a rowboat when he was younger for his hard work. The rowboat was gone, but he still had the work ethic his grandfather had installed in him. Those things never go away, he said. The conversation ended, and Anthony thanked him again and apologized if he had made him late for an appointment. Mr. Rogers just smiled, answering, Sometimes you're right where you need to be. 1 Thessalonians 5:11 says, So encourage each other and build each other up, just as you are already doing. Think of a person you know who may be going through a hard time. Find some time today to say a kind word, or send them a text, or call them. And remember, there is always time for encouragement.
Well, good day, 365 Christian men. My name is Russell, and it is February 19th. And I just heard the podcast about Fred Rogers, Mr. Rogers in his neighborhood. And who doesn't get a smile on their face when I think about Mr. Rogers? Just one of the great men of all time. Always compassion. So many words describe this great man. And one of the things that I noticed about Mr. Rogers, who was in my neighborhood, in my living room growing up, was he never made it about him. He always made it about someone else. And I was thinking about that, and I was reminded about a verse in the Bible, which comes from John 13:4. And it says this: "So Jesus got up from the table, took off his robe, wrapped a towel around his waist, and poured water into a basin. Then he began to wash the disciples' feet and to wipe them with the towel that he had around him." It's like, how unselfish is that? To not make it about you, but make it about somebody else. And what a wonderful lesson to be thinking about as we go through our day today. And as luck would have it, happen to run into a picture, and wouldn't you know it? Mr. Rogers wiping down the feet of another. Never about him, always about somebody else. My challenge today for you fellow Christian men is, how about we do this? How about we find somebody today that we wash their feet? Maybe it's through compassion. Maybe it's through being supportive. Maybe it's being a good listener. Maybe just showing genuine interest in somebody else today. And it's just see where that leads us all. It's good advice for everyone. God bless you.